Hello, my name is Maureen Freely. I'm a translator and writer. I'm the chair of the Writers Organization English Pen, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to two wonderful translators from the Georgian, and to ask them a few questions about the work that they translate and also their work as translators. I'll begin by introducing you to Lynn Coffin, who is a poet and a novelist, a writer of many virtues and accomplishments. Her translation of The Knight in the Panther Skin, which is the great national epic of Georgia, written in the 12th century by Shota Rustaveli, was published in 2015, and it won Georgia's highest literary award, the Saba Prize. I also have the pleasure of introducing you to Tamar Japaridze, who's a translator and academic, and she's translated from English into Georgian more than 30 books and plays, and she has really good taste. These authors include Shakespeare, Kipling, Pinter, Henry Miller, John Fowles, Margaret Atwood, Kazuo Ishiguro, Arundhati Roy, Irvine Welsh, and Bernardine Evaristo. And she's here to introduce us to her most recent translation from Georgian into English, Bestseller by Becca Adamashvili, who is also part of Georgia's fantastic Tavern this year. And so we have one of the oldest literary works with one of the newest, and there's so much in between, and I hope we'll get a chance to understand the great literature between the bookends, as well as looking at these works. And as a translator from a language whose literature is largely unknown outside its national borders, that being Turkey, I know that translators very, very often do much, much more than the work on the page. And so that's how I'd like to begin. Lynn, could you introduce us to Rustaveli and his Knight? Tell us a bit about this wonderful epic.
Well, it's akin to asking somebody to introduce Shakespeare. He has everything. Somebody asked me what I liked about Rustaveli, and I said, I can tell you the one thing I didn't like. There's only one thing. So the characters are magnificent. The narrative is terrific. The aphorisms are there. The scope of the interest is amazing. The music is wonderful. The knowledge, everything is great. The only thing that I didn't like in translating these 1,661 quatrains was occasionally Rustaveli will give you a list of something at a wedding. He'll describe that they had chalices and bowls and soup, and they had knives, and he will list a long thing. And that for me was the only time in all this translation that I found my attention wandering. If you don't mind occasional lists, then this is a work of genius. This is a work of sustained, top of the three world's best. Just the thing that I didn't expect, the two things, one were the humor. There's a lot of humor in it. And also the fact that each chapter ends with a kind of cliffhanger so that you're propelled into the next.
Okay. So as far as those banquets are concerned, he was simply following in Homer's footsteps, if you ask me. But I'd also, in addition to your, love of this as a work of art and as one of the most important works of art that we should be reading alongside all of the, the famous names that we have in the West. Can you give a brief description of the story? So we begin with a king and his aide, and very quickly they run into a crying knight who's also incredibly fierce. But if you can just take us through the storyline.
Okay, well, so they run into this crying knight, and the king sends the servants out to bring him back, and the knight is peaceful, but he doesn't want to be interrupted, and he makes it clear that he doesn't want this, but they insist, and so he ends up killing all of them with his whip. And one straggles back to the king, and the king sends knights and so forth, and they also get polished off. And then the king himself goes after this knight, and he disappears. So then we have, I mean, this is, it asked me to summarize the Bible. So the king's daughter sends for her the sort of a commander of the army, a young, and they're in love, and she says that she will marry him, but she gives him a quest. For 2 years, he has to search out and try to find this mysterious knight. So he goes and he finds a knight. I mean,
okay. What we have is the knight going off on a quest, and if he achieves what the king's daughter has achieved, he'll have her hand in marriage. Yes, and along the way he does find the crying knight, who has a very, very tragic story. Well, it's tragic at that time. By the end, we have 3 knights who are great friends, having been through many adventures together, and they all help each other, and they all get to know happiness. And in the meantime, they have covered the earth in their travels, as far as I can see. So it's also an incredibly, for me, a modern feeling story. You know, it begins with the poet speaking to us directly, and the poet does speak to us directly a few other times, I think. It seemed to me. Do you think you could read a little bit of it so that we get a sense of the music of the?
Sure. And I wanted to say that part of the modernism for me is Savelli's views on some of his passages, especially the famous lions, whelps or lions, whether they're male or female. His approach to gender. The women are incredibly strong and almost masculine sometimes, and the men are incredibly in touch with their feminine, softer side. So it's just incredibly modern. And the passage that I'd like to read touches on that. It's when the knight first he's afraid to contact the mysterious knight who's disappeared directly, because he knows that one of them will die, and it probably will be him. So he contacts the woman who's living in the cave with him. And this is Asmat, a middle-aged woman, and one of the things that happens in this chapter is this shift. So Oftendale starts by putting a knife to Asmat's throat and demanding that she tell him the story. The knight thought, thus I cannot make her speak. I need to let her go. I must think of a way to persuade her that I am not her foe. He released her and sat down. He began to weep, let his tears flow. He said, I have angered you, madam. How to soothe you, I don't know. The maiden sits morose, resentful. She has not yet warmed to him. Oftendale sits below her. Unspeaking, he weeps. His face is grim. I'm going to skip a little bit. He said, I know I've proved myself unworthy of a sister's trust. Since I've angered you and stayed a stranger, reject me as you must. I put myself, though, at your mercy, humble at your feet like dust. For it is said, repentant sinners are forgiven by the just. Though at the start I did not show any benevolence to you, yet as a lover I can still claim your pity. Is it not true? This is my only defense. All other defenses I eschew. I give you my life for the sake of my heart. What else can I do? When the maiden heard from the knight of his love, she wept even more. Sobbing, she began shedding tears that seemed to flow from her heart's core. Again, she began wailing as if she lay at agony's door. The knight was glad. The tale he wanted from her lips would surely pour. And then the last part here, skipping again. Since you have now spoken openly of love, which before you hid, because of your loving words, I'll serve you despite what you first did. I shall devote myself to you. Of sadness, I shall see you rid. I'll die for your sake if I don't find a way to do as you have bid. So we go in the course of maybe 2 minutes, this guy trying to kill her. She's screaming, she's not going to tell him anything. Then he changes several times. Then he says, I'm sorry, I did it out of love. And then she says, okay, I'll die if I don't get away to serve you. And it all seems, I mean, it's just wonderfully intense and back and forth. It's just terrific.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so large-hearted and also cosmopolitan. I can't to use a
Very.
word that's that we wouldn't think to apply to the 12th century unless we knew a little bit more about it. Thank you so much. I'm going to come to you now, Tamar, and I'm wondering if you could introduce us to Adamashvili and his bestseller.
Would you like me to speak about the book?
Yes,
It's,
please. Yes, please. Yes.
so Becca is a young writer. It is his second book. Generally, he's a blogger, in fact, a very popular one, full of sense of humor, and the book is very, very humorous. This is a kind of, well, a travel into the literary hell, so to say, full of writers, of course. So one not very good writer commits suicide, and he gets into the literary hell, meeting a lot of very popular old and new writers there, who are tortured according to the things. Well, they are tortured in the same way as they torture readers, so to say. Yes. For instance, James Joyce has to write footnotes for his footnotes, and so on and so forth. So it's very funny indeed.
Yeah.
And it was quite difficult to translate because he's fond of puns and paraphrased idioms, you know. Lots of them, everything is full of that. And sometimes it was very difficult to find adequate phrases in English.
But you did. Yeah, it's very lighthearted.
I tried to. For instance, there is one, he says somewhere that all roads, it's Dante who says it, all roads lead to Rome. But in Georgian, Rome, and in conjunction expressing some kind of hesitation, there are allophones. So I had to find something like that. And I decided on all roads led to the roaming and the gloaming in the dark. But I had to look for that piece for a very long time. So there were lots of that kind of difficulties there.
But what you did is you get the voice of the young, very well read, again very cosmopolitan author who's having a playful conversation with his readers in a very disarming way. You know, not pushing for laughs. It's just the whole thing is very, very funny. Yes. So so well done. I was wondering if you could read a little bit in Georgian first and a little bit in Georgian so that we can hear the language. I'm very curious to hear the language. And then in English.
I did. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely, yes. Enjoyed translating it very much. I generally enjoy his books. I mean, 2 books. And I greatly hope that I'll translate the next one as well. It's also about literature. It's also about literature. And the book is called Everyone Dies in This Novel. So the characters, literary characters who are going to die there, try to save themselves moving into other books. And it's very funny indeed. He's a very nice young fellow. Yes, I enjoyed really. But what I want to say is that main difficulty when you translate from Georgian into English and vice versa. So Lynn, you are wonderful in that way. The main difficulty is that Georgian words are very long, very long. There might be 6 syllables, and because Georgian is a synthetic language, whereas English is analytic. So, for instance, I have had my breakfast can be expressed in one word.
Oh,
This
that's
tells me, and
That's
it expresses everything. So, especially when you translate poetry, and I had to translate some pieces of poetry as well some time ago, it's very, very difficult to translate poetry, especially into Georgian. And into English as well. So this is quite different language, absolutely different, not Indo-European. Georgian language is quite different from that. Another difficulty is that, for instance, personal pronouns, if we take personal pronouns, there's no grammatical gender, which might be very popular in the modern world, where there are, lots of non-binaries and transes and so on. And sometimes, for instance, let's take Hemingway, when he has she said something, then he said, it's very difficult to translate it into Georgian because Georgian language has no difference in personal pronouns. And by the way, the prototype of Lynn's Panther Night in Panther Skin, she was a woman, right? But she was not a queen, she was called king. Because queen in Georgian is just a wife of a king, not a monarch. So she was King Tamar, my name, by the way. Yeah. Well, I don't know. It was easier to translate, of course, Bestseller than the work Lynn has done, because it's very, very, very serious and difficult poem, even in Georgian.
May I say something here, Tamar?
Yeah.
What I found the most difficulty was actually English syllabification.
Yeah.
So the lines are 16 syllables, but for example, the word sovereign, you can, in all the English authorities, you can say sovereign as 2 syllables or 3 syllables, and there are big arguments whether it's 2 or 3. And so I had to find my own thing. So that was interesting that it was the English that provided the most. I mean, there were many difficulties, of course, translating the Georgian, but for me, trying to get it into English syllabification was the hardest thing of all.
Yeah, all right. The same happens when you translate from English into Georgian, especially poetry, because the words are too long in Georgian. That's it.
Before you read us a bit from the book, I was going to, you're one of those special geniuses who can travel in both directions as a translator, yes? So you translate from English into Georgian and from Georgian into English. And so how is it different when you go in the different directions? You've spoken about the special virtues, I would say, of Georgian that make it distinct, yes? And but what are the other issues that you run up against that are different depending on the direction you're traveling in, from Georgian to English or English to Georgian?
Main difficulty, generally, frankly speaking, I think that a native person should translate into his language. It's always better because you should feel the language very well. One thing is that you can speak foreign language, but another thing is how you operate on that language, right? Well, I don't know really.
You did it. You did it.
I tried to do my best. Anyway, I somehow managed to maintain 90% of what how it sounds in Georgian and how it feels in Georgian. I hope so, anyway.
Would you be able to read us a little bit now?
Sorry, pardon?
Be able to read us a little bit now? First, a few sentences in Georgian, and then in English.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll start with Georgian. დიახ, პიერმა გადაწყვიტა თავის საკუთარი შემოქმედებისათვის შეეწირა, რადგანაც იცოდა, რომ სიკვდილს აქვს ერთი უკვდავი უნარი, გაზარდოს პატივისცემა ადამიანთა მიმართ. საუკუნოდირების მისაღწევად კი თავის მოკლა ერთადერთი ამოსავალ წერტილად ჩანდა, რადგანაც პიერმა იცოდა კიდევ ერთი აპრობირებული მაქსიმა, რომ უკვდავებისთვის პირველ ყოვლისა სიკვდილია საჭირო. I'll read the same in English now. Oh yes, Pierre decided to sacrifice himself to his creative life, as he knew that death has one immortal feature: it boosts respect. Suicide was the only way for him to achieve eternal glory, because he knew another proven maxim too: a man had to die to gain a deathless fame. That's it.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It was very short, but I think it was enough. So languages don't sound like one another at all. You might have
no, but the voice somehow, of course, you're reading them both. It's the voice that you carry over into English. So well done.
Thank you.
To ask you, Lynn, now about your work with co-translators, because you've done a lot of work with co-translators, haven't you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I always work with the native speakers. One more thing about the difference between the Georgian and English, that English has a lot more words. I think it's 7,000 and something compared to maybe a third of that in Georgian. But as I came to find out, Georgian has more rhymes. More rhymes, so that makes it difficult. So anyway, yes. So work with co-translators. I'm sorry, what would the question be?
Yes, how do you work with your co-translators, and how did you come to work with co-translators? I'm asking as somebody who has worked with co-translators, so I'm interested to find out different experiences.
Well, each time was slightly different. When I did the anthology of Georgian poetry, I worked with Japaridze in the beginning. He was the one who invited me to come to Georgia and arranged living, and he's a Brodsky scholar in Georgia, a wonderful man, and a professor at Ilia University. And anyway, so we worked together. I would come to his office. And we would work together every day. Important for me to get the sound, hear the rhythm. And then he would help me he would do a bitskarity, a word for word translation. And then we would talk about idioms, and I would do a rough draft, and we would discuss. I mean, it took a long time. And then at the end of my first attempt to translate Georgian and English, it was through doing that I came across Rustaveli for the first time. Anyway, then following that, Dodona Kaziria also read the manuscript, and she had a lot to say about that and her scholarship in the area and so forth. Each co-translator, right now I'm just finishing a anthology of translation of Rajden Gvetadze, who was one of the Blue Antlers or Blue Horns, and who died in 1952, born in 1897. But anyway, I've been working with Zal Zurabashvili and Nino Darbaiseli, and then asking for help occasionally from Levan Giganishvili. And so that's been a real challenge. But each co-translator, just as each translator, each writer is a different person, and you work with each one differently. I don't know if there's a general, I guess the one word.
I know. General. I mean, I think it's just a wonderful sort of relationship when it works.
It is.
Yes.
Right. Well, maybe I could mention that anecdotally. So when Dodona Kaziri and I did the anthology of Georgian poetry, she wrote the introduction, and it was very scholarly. And the publisher asked me to do a personal note, and we had a deadline, and so I wrote this one-page personal anecdote, and I sent it out, and I said, tell me if this is incorrect, or if you don't like this, or whatever. I didn't hear back from anyone, so I sent off the manuscript. And the publisher, then I heard the day after the deadline from Dodona, she was very angry. She hated my one page, and she said, what do you think, you're a white goddess coming to uneducated Georgians? And she was really offended. And, so I sent the publisher the same manuscript without my introduction, without telling why, and said, please use this version. So we never published it. So when it came time to do the Rustaveli, the publisher asked me who I would like to work with. And I said, well, Dodona and I, we really clashed. And so I don't know, but she's a poet in English and Georgian. Her scholarship is impeccable. And I wrote Dodona and asked her, and I said, I know we didn't get along, but would you mind? And I will try to get along. And so she did, and it was amazing. From the beginning, we got along perfectly. We were just in sync. She liked my translation. I loved her scholarship. We were complementary to each other. So I don't know, something went wrong in one book, but it did not translate, thank goodness, to the next. So
I mean, I would say that I don't embark on any translation without without learning a lot.
Right.
And also without learning how wrong I am about so many things. So it's only education, and it always adds to my, it feeds into the other work I do. And that's the other question I was wanting to ask both of you, and I'll ask you first, Tamar, which is a lifetime of translation, or an adult lifetime of translation. How has it fed into your other practice as an academic, as somebody who's also very engaged with drama, it seems to me?
I would say that vice versa. My academic line had some kind of influence on it. Because, well, I don't know. Translation, no, I cannot say that translation had some kind of influence or enriched anything in my academic knowledge, because I'm old enough and my academic experience is already very long. So I don't think so, that it had some kind of, so it enriched anything. But
you could say that what you've translated has brought a lot of writers into Georgian who have enriched the canon in Georgia, or at least given people the chance to understand all of the jokes in Bestseller. Yes, because this is a very well-read culture. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's,
yes. I think Georgia is the most poetry loving and literature loving people in the world. I was absolutely astounded at how, and the statues in Tbilisi, that was the first thing that struck me. There are hundreds of statues, and almost all of them are of directors and actresses and writers and painters, and only one or two generals on a horse with swords, only one or two. Everything else is art, and people just love it, no matter small town, big town. And they not only quote Rustaveli, they can quote Dickinson, they can quote Hemingway, I was astounded. And here in America, you don't find that, I will say.
No.
By the way, you will be, maybe it will sound a little bit odd to you, but it's the influence of the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. The Soviet Union, it was, so to say, in fashion to read a lot. And the more you read, the more popular person you were and welcome in any situation. So people read a lot, which I cannot say at the present time, Georgian, unfortunately.
Although you do find peasants, so-called peasants, or primitive so-called people in villages who for decades, ever since like the 16th century, have been memorizing the knight in the panther skin and giving it to their daughters as a dowry. So that was way before Soviet, but I take your point. I do see that.
Yeah.
So it does mean that the practice of translation plays a very important role in Georgian culture.
By the way, good translations, translation became very popular in after 70s, because before that, again in the Soviet Union, please don't think that I feel nostalgic, but there were excellent translations into Russian, and we mostly read in Russian all the foreign, poets or writers or whoever it was. So into Georgian, they started translating mostly. Well, there were translations earlier, but they were not of good quality. Good quality translations started after 1970s.
Okay, that's very interesting. So can you tell me more about how that happened? Was there an understanding that things had to get better? How did they get better? We think about this a lot in England and America. Us translators, and we've been working pretty hard on this. So I just wanted to know.
Well, I don't know what happened. The thing is that maybe after dismembering of the Soviet Union, people, younger generation don't speak any Russian, or they speak English, most of them. They, of course, speak Georgian. So there was a great demand on Georgian translations. So publishing houses started, got very interested in translation, and they started issuing those translations, and and there were good translators were simply selected during some time. And yes, and besides, they started literary prizes and things like that. Lynn, I know Lynn has got one of the best prizes, literary prizes for her translation. I was present when you were awarded that prize. Unfortunately, I can't get a hold of your translation. Unfortunately, I don't even know where to get it.
I'm sorry, but you can get it on Amazon until today. I just sold the last copy, but it's on Amazon, and I would be happy to send you a copy.
I see.
Make sure you get a copy.
Yeah, it also has beautiful illustrations. I was going to ask you about the illustrations.
It's wonderful. It won a book design award as well as, and this is all the more remarkable because I don't think you'll be able to see it very well, but these are wonderful. This is all Nato Al-Hazashvili. When I wanted to, I had my live stream to translate Rustaveli, and I told this to Dato Barbakadze, a wonderful Georgian poet who was like a brother to me. And he started asking people, and he would say, I know this poet, I think she can do it. And he asked Nato, who was not a publisher, had nothing to do with publishing. And he said, where can we find a publisher? And he said, I think Lynn can do this. It would be a great thing. And Nato said, I'll become a publisher to translate this. So she became a publisher. She found the book designer. She found the people in Turkey to actually manufacture the book. She found the Levin Giganishvili to do she found her, she did everything herself. And she gave me a wonderful advance, and she did everything that you could do. And it was completely now she's become a publisher in her own right, Poesia Press. But it was all for the service of Rustaveli. So we used to talk about ourselves, the three strong women, because it was Dodona Kaziria, myself, and Nato Al-Hazashvili. Between the three of us, we really did this.
See, when I was just a novelist, I was just in my study writing my just a novels, and I had an agent, and I wasn't really very aware of all of the unsung heroes of literary culture. And it was after I started translating that I started understanding how important so many people are in this process, and how much they can achieve when they start working together in the way that you're both describing. I think that you have a great deal to teach many other cultures and countries. We certainly have a lot more we can learn from you and with you, if you like. So the if you're going to describe the literary culture that you found, Lynn, in Tbilisi and in Georgia, and also Tamar, that you are part of, is it everybody who loves the arts is working together in some way? Is it very much, or is it divided up?
Well, speaking for me, I didn't really experience the literary culture when I was first there. What I experienced was a culture that was literary. I experienced everybody was involved, everybody was interested, everybody wished me well and wanted to help and so forth. And I still don't, I'm still sort of on the outside, because when you were asking Tamar about the enriching, I'm not an academic, I'm not a scholar, I don't have any of this. What I am is a writer, a poet, a writer, and working on Rustaveli in some mysterious way really enriched my poetry, and I think my poetry enriched my translation, and it's all,
yes.
So there's that. And then one last question in response to your unsung heroes. I wanted to mention that there's a Czech writer that I translated named Jiří Orten. This is Georgian, so I want to keep that straight. But to mention, he's a Czech writer, a poet who died in the Holocaust when he was 22 years old. And he's one of the world's great poets. And people don't know about him. One of the frustrations, I have this translation of his in Orten, and he needs to be recognized. And I hope, when you say unsung hero, I think I have to mention Jiří Orten, and hopefully in England, some of the poetry foundations, somebody will promote this wonderful, wonderful poet.
Is he in Georgian yet?
No, it's no.
I have a question that I'd like to ask both of you as we approach the end of our conversation. I was very struck that Rustaveli had in the 12th century, it was clear that he was in conversation with other, with the great literatures of the world. Yes, so he was very much working in that, it seemed to me, and of course, there in literary hell, Adam really is very much a cosmopolitan writer. I wouldn't, obviously, it's different for our epic poet, but it doesn't take place entirely inside the land of Georgia either, does it? It's philosophically, spiritually, very, very broad, isn't it?
And physically, it doesn't take place. And Georgia is nowhere in the Night in the Panther Skin.
Yeah. But
so India,
but also the understanding of religion, as you said before, gender. It's very it's epic in its understanding of emotion, of spirituality and so on. So it's very, very not just emotionally expansive, but intellectually and expansive in my view. And as far as what would you say, Tamar, about the literary influences of Orhan Freely? And is there a writer he likes who wouldn't be in literary hell?
No. There are no influences, but as he knows that those writers very well and their work, so there are lots of allusions.
Yeah.
So it's difficult even to guess if there is any influence, because there are allusions, a lot of pieces from many different things.
Yes.
Pieces from literature and, you know, not even from literature, but from some movies and so on. So it is a big pun, so to say. The whole text is a big pun, huge pun,
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
For instance,
Yes.
when he enters the hotel, which is named after Hotello, after Shakespeare, there on the bar, there is a poster, to beer or not to beer. So he does not remind anyone. I cannot say that he had any influence of any writer, Georgian or English or whoever.
But I would say that what you've just described is he has a lot of counter influences. Not you, you go to hell. Not you, you go to hell. And then we can all have a laugh and to have a beer or not to beer. So anyway, that's I would like to thank you both for doing the translations that have introduced me to the dawn of Georgian literature and the new light.
Not the sunset.
So thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
really feel very privileged. I'd like to give you a chance, Lynn, to talk about your novel that just came out, that you've made a very kind offer on. Yes?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I appreciate that. One word about Rustaveli. I also, Tamar, I really appreciate it. I don't think you can speak of influence on Rustaveli, although people try to posit that influence. But there is this huge pond, as you say, an ocean in Rustaveli's case. And there are these allusions, but it's difficult. We don't know anything. The novel that I hoping people will be interested in is called The Aftermath, and it was published in the fall by Adelaide Books in New York. And you can get a free ebook. I won't give the link here, but if you get in touch with me through anybody, I'm glad to. I've made it free. It's supposed to be just for reviewers, but anybody who wants to read it as an ebook may read it for free. And The Aftermath is also available as a paperback on Amazon. And I think it's an important book, and it is my first novel after 33 books. So I'm hoping you'll check it out.
Okay.
And
Thank
it's
you
been
very
a
much.
privilege to be here with Tamar. I know so much about your work, and great to be with you, Maureen. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. And then Tamar, is there anything we should be looking out for next? What are you working on now?
Right now, today I have finished Evaristo's novel, which was awarded also book prize. It was today, and tomorrow I'm starting Arundhati Roy's next book.
Goodness. Okay, well,
I'm engaged all the time in
well,
that.
congratulations. Yes. Congratulations to you both. You're both much harder working than I am, so I'll take you as an example, as two examples. But once again, thank you to you both for joining us at the Fantastic Tavern this evening, and I hope we have a beer or not to beer together
Right.
very soon. Okay.
Definitely to have a beer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.